All right, well, welcome everyone. My name is Paul Cameron, and I'm the Director of Brattleboro Climate Protection and Town Energy Coordinator. And I want to thank Marlboro Grad Center for co-sponsoring this event tonight. And Michael, you introduce yourself?
Yeah, well, I'm Michael Bosworth. I'm part of a couple of energy groups. I'm part of Brattleboro Thermal Utility. I'm also part of Co-op Power of Southern Vermont. So I'm very interested in renewable energy and energy issues in general. So we'll go back to the beginning now.
So what we want to do tonight is tell you a little bit about the tar sands in the proposed Keystone Pipeline XL project, and also about the movement that's arisen to oppose it and why. And then once we're done with that, we're going to show a short film, about 3 minutes, and then we'll have an open discussion.
So are people familiar with where the tar sands are? They're up in Alberta, Canada. I mean, that's the biggest place where most of them are right now.
Is there some in the U.S. too?
There are some, but this is by far the biggest sort of concentration up in Alberta.
It's an area the size of Florida that's estimated to be mined for this very heavy crude oil. And the Environmental Defense Fund calls it the world's most destructive project.
So at the top of the map there, you see Alberta, and all that part in brown is where the tar sands are concentrated. So this map then shows the proposed pipeline. It's actually a map that combines existing pipeline for carrying oil with proposed new pipeline. The new pipeline is the dotted line that comes down from Calgary down through, you can tell what the states are, Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, and then there's another extension down from the northern part of Oklahoma down to the Gulf Coast. So there's some existing pipeline already taking some of the tar sand oil and transporting it, but this proposed Keystone XL pipeline would greatly increase the capacity, the carrying capacity to transport that oil to through the sort of the heartland of the U.S.
One of the things you'll notice is that the proposed route crosses the Ogallala Aquifer, which is one of the largest sources of water for drinking and agriculture in the country. And so there are concerns that if there was a leak or spill from the pipeline, it would contaminate the aquifer.
And maybe taking one step back, as far as the tar sands themselves, they're a very extensive area. It's a very energy-intensive process to actually get the oil out of the ground. There's a lot of strip mining almost that takes place, but then just the processing it into a form that can be transported takes a lot of energy itself. And that's one of the issues, is really how much greenhouse gases are just emitted just in the processing of it, so it can be transported. It is also the second largest known resource of petroleum in the world, behind Saudi Arabia's. So it is a major source. It is a project of TransCanada. I think people know that name. Same company that owns hydroelectric dams on the Connecticut and Deerfield rivers.
So as we've talked about, there are a number of concerns about the pipeline. Every major environmental group in the U.S. has signed on to oppose the pipeline. which is very unusual for environmental groups to agree on anything. But every single one has said that they oppose it. And as well as Vermont's entire congressional delegation and Governor Shumlin. So most of you probably are familiar with Bill McKibben, who's a Vermont-based environmentalist and writer. He and some others in the 350.org organization organized a protest against the pipeline in front of the White House every day for 2 weeks, starting on August 20th. And my involvement is that I went down with Walter Schwartz, who's here tonight also, to get arrested about a week into the protest. And we weren't successful in getting arrested because of Hurricane Irene, but we were down there, and it was a really great experience to be with all these people who were, really care about this issue and were energized around it.
My involvement's a little bit shorter. I also actually intended to get arrested, and I had paid to get on a bus that was coming down from Burlington, so I paid my money for the round trip. And that bus was leaving the morning that Hurricane Irene came in. That was that Sunday morning. I would have had to drive to Rutland to pick it up to get on that bus. And I just didn't know what the hurricane might do to, I didn't want to leave my wife behind having to deal with a tree over the house or something. So although I really wanted to go, I ended up not going. Therefore, I didn't get arrested either. So we tried, but all of us didn't get arrested.
Michael, could we go back one for a second?
That one?
Or actually, I just wanted to bring up a couple of other issues around the pipeline. One is that most of the land where the tar sands are being mined is Native American land. So that's an issue that these tribes' sacred land is being destroyed, basically. And so a lot of, really the impetus for this protest came from the Native peoples who've lived in this land for generations. Another issue is that area is covered by boreal forest, and of course they have to cut down the forest to mine the tar sands, which destroys a source of carbon that's been locked up. Of course, it creates erosion and other problems. Another issue is when they mine the sands, they create these massive lagoons filled with toxic wastewater, which leak inevitably into the ground. And then they use special equipment to extract the sands, which is just enormous. Some of the equipment is 3 stories high, and it has to be brought in. Actually, it's manufactured in Korea. They bring it to Washington State and ship it up the Columbia and Snake Rivers, and then transport it across Idaho up to Alberta. So there's a lot of concerns about moving this very heavy equipment on roads that aren't built to withstand that kind of size and weight.
Although Obama is certainly listening to his own State Department, which is, plays the role of making a recommendation on this, in this case, the decision's actually up to the president. He doesn't have to go through Congress at all. So he alone will be deciding whether this project gets built in the U.S. And he said he will be deciding sometime this fall. Exactly when, we don't know. I think, as Paul said, Bill McKibben was one of the ones who sent out the invitation, but there were others. Some people may recognize the name Gus Speth, who's at the Vermont Law School. It was a call for 2 weeks of sustained civil disobedience at the White House from August 20th to September 3rd. And is supported by 19 climate scientists, and as Paul said, the directors of 28 environmental and allied organizations. So this is day one, basically what it looked like. This is in front of the White House, and there were 65 arrests that day, including Bill McKibben himself, Gus Speff, and Dan Choi. And so anybody who, everybody who got arrested was prepared to make that commitment. There was actually civil disobedience training the night before, so people could fully understand what they should be doing. And everything was meant to be totally respectful of the authorities, so people were not disrespectful at all. People were asked to dress well, and then so the park police gave a couple of warnings, and then when people did not move, they were then arrested. And this first group, this was a Saturday, right? And those people actually stayed in jail for 2 days. After that, the subsequent people who got arrested were normally let out the same day.
Yeah, the park police were trying to discourage, they were trying to sort of nip it in the bud, I think, by putting people in jail for 2 days, but it obviously didn't work. Increasing numbers of people got arrested until the very last day there were over 200 people that got arrested. And I think you said there were over 1,250 in total who were arrested.
Right. This gives you some idea about the other days. Day 3, 52 arrests, including representatives of Bold, Nebraska. This pipeline is opposed by a lot of people in Nebraska, including the Republican governor of Nebraska. And because it goes right through the state, it passes right over the big aquifer there. And so there a lot of people there are not in favor of this. Day 4, 60 arrests, including a couple of Canadian actresses. People maybe, well, Margot Kidder is more well known, but Tantu Cardinal is a Native American herself. And they're both Canadian actresses, as it says. Day 10, 143 arrests, including NASA's James Hansen. He's often called the most knowledgeable person about climate change. And he felt so strongly about this that he was willing to go down and get arrested himself. I guess the day you and Walter were due to be arrested was day 8, right? So, day 11, 73 arrests, including dozens of folks from Hurricane Irene ravaged Vermont. Those are a lot of those people were the people on the bus that I was supposed to get on. Day 14, 166 arrests, including the Indigenous Environmental Network. And then the final day was day 15, when there were 243 arrests in total, with just over 1,250. I got it.
That's Walter and I over the White House. And Walter, I hope you don't mind that when we went down to Washington, it was Walter's 85th birthday, the day that we left. And we were disappointed, though, that we didn't get arrested. The park police were preparing for the hurricane, so in respect of that, no one got arrested that weekend.
So that's what day 8 looked like, the day Walter and Paul would have gotten arrested. But they did have a rally in the rain to show the resolve, didn't risk arrest in respect for the state of emergency called for the District of Columbia. This is the final day when the most arrests were made, 243. So that many arrests, 3,500 mentions in the press, including front page of the New York Times, Washington Post, The other media listed there. Also, New York Times itself had an editorial opposing the pipeline. International solidarity actions elsewhere in the world. It really raised just the level of awareness, if nothing else, about the whole tar sands and tar sands pipeline issue. I know I corresponded with my in-laws who live in D.C., and when I first corresponded, they did not know about it, the issue at all. You know, by the time we got finished corresponding, I was going to stay at their house. They were following it.
And actually today there was an action in Ottawa in front of the government building there, and over 200 people were arrested today.
How many people?
Over 200.
Some politicians are taking a stand. Senator Leahy and Sanders have both objected to the building of this pipeline. Governor Shumlin has come out strongly in opposition. I mentioned earlier the Republican governor of Nebraska has raised objections. Even before, at a recent University of Nebraska football game, they had a contract with TransCanada, and so they had an ad going on during the game. It must have been on the scoreboard, an electronic scoreboard, about the pipeline, and people at the stadium just started booing heavily. And now the University of Nebraska has stopped those ads. So the word is getting out. I think it's kind of interesting to me what Representative Peter Welch has brought up. He or his people have found out some interesting things. And TransCanada's own regulatory filings indicate that TransCanada believes gas prices will rise by $6 per barrel in the Midwest, and $3 per barrel in the rest of the U.S. if this pipeline is built. And we'll get to the map in a second, so why that might be true. Also, a recent report shows several of the largest oil refining corporations plan on re-exporting oil transported by the pipeline into the global market. So even though this pipeline would go across the U.S., and you think, all right, that will add to our energy security, the companies, in fact, at least have an intention of re-exporting that elsewhere in the world. So going back to the map, where you see the pipeline coming down here, so obviously once it gets to the Gulf Coast, it could be easily re-exported elsewhere in the world. So the oil itself is has to be refined, so some of the refining would be going on here. And because you're starting up in Alberta, Canada, transporting it all this way, refining it down here, and then some of it would go back to the Midwest. That's why the price of oil essentially would rise by the $6 per barrel that TransCanada predicts as a result of the pipeline. What's next nationally? Continue to pressure President Obama to be the climate leader we elected in 2008. You want to go over some?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that this particular project was chosen to focus on by the environmental groups is that this is not a decision that has to be made by Congress. This is not a bill that has to get through the House and the Senate. This is something that Obama can say yes or no to. And he's pledged that he will decide by November. And if you recall, when Obama was campaigning, he said that if he was elected president, the rising of the seas would begin to slow and the planet would begin to heal. And so environmental groups are holding him to his words, which are he's going to take strong action against climate change. And so now he has a golden opportunity to do just that. And so the protests are they're not against Obama at all, but they're simply encouraging him and supporting him to make the right decision and to turn down the permit for this pipeline.
There's a phone number you can call. You could also submit an opinion by the whitehouse.gov website. Down here, the second to the last bullet point, part of this is to try and target the offices, the Obama offices that might be in some of the larger cities. Right now, there's no Obama office in Brattleboro or Keene, but there's still offices at this point in places like Boston, presumably, so put some pressure on there. And then on November 6th, an action in district and down in DC, not to get arrested this time, but just to surround the White House, have enough people go down there to be able to have a large circle around the White House. Probably not right next to the White House, but outside the grounds. Did I end up skipping over a couple?
And that's actually 1 year before the election. That's why they chose that date to have that action.
You can find out more at this web address, tarsandsaction.org.
Should I just go on?
I was just going to, I think I skipped over a couple of slides I wanted to, about the State Department.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, this is one more behind it. Yeah, yes, the State Department was certainly asked to weigh in on this. Obviously, this is an international thing, given the U.S. and Canada and its relations. So it has come out and said that the pipeline should be built after it completed an environmental impact study. I've gone and looked at parts of that study, especially the executive summary. It focuses just on the pipeline, not on the whole system's impact. So it doesn't get into the issue of, all right, if these tar sands produce oil, a lot more climate causing climate change gases will be released into the atmosphere. It doesn't deal with that. It just makes the simple assumption that the project is not likely to impact the amount of crude oil produced from the oil sands. It's going to happen anyway. And then this is words taken directly from the study. The Department of State Commission study estimated that the incremental life cycle U.S. greenhouse gas emissions from displacing reference crude oil, in other words, the regular crude oils that would be the source for our petroleum, if that gets displaced with the equivalent amount of Canadian sands, crude oils, imported through the proposed pipeline, the amount would be between 3 and 21 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions annually, and that is equivalent to the annual greenhouse gas emissions from the combustion of fuels in between 588,000 and 4 million passenger vehicles. So this is taken directly from the same State Department study that recommends that the pipeline be built.
Why is there such a huge range?
I could not tell you that. I don't know. Don't know. It does seem very large to me as well.
Just one other thing I wanted to share. Environmental engineer John Stansberry has taken a closer look at TransCanada's claims that at most 11 serious spills are likely to occur over 50 years. Stansberry's research shows that the number is closer to 91 spills.
Okay, so should we,
Yeah.
let's just go play the 3-minute video that was made of the protest. It's a little ad for the Marlboro Graduate School.
So this is the website that has all the updates on what's going on with the protests. This is the
because of what you've done over the last 2 weeks, an issue that really wasn't a national issue has emerged as the kind of crux test between now and the election for Barack Obama, and a real chance for once to make a dent in the carbon pouring into the atmosphere.
I'm from Canada, and let me tell you something. We don't have ethical oil in Canada. We have tar sands oil, which is like regular oil, but a whole lot dirtier.
You have to destroy the earth! You have to destroy the earth to get tar sands oil! You have to pollute the waters! We are at a tipping point in America's history for this environmental movement. With the XL pipeline, we can set a standard for everybody else to follow. With enough pressure for that man over there, we can change history right now, today!
So Barack, I don't know where you are, but if you're listening, I'd like to talk to you. I'd like to bring you to North Dakota. I'd like to give you a taste of my reality. And then I want you to look me in the eyes and tell me that you're going to do this, because I don't think you could. I don't think after coming to my life, you could honestly look me in the eyes and say that it's a good thing.
We had a dream that the new president would understand the intergenerational injustice of human-made climate change. That he would recognize our duty to be caretakers of creation, of the land, of the life on our planet. For the sake of our children and grandchildren, we must find someone who is worthy of our dreams.
To make this movement successful, this moment here needs to be a moment where we say it will not be business as usual anymore. We have got to say this time, at this moment, we stand up and we, as people, say no.
This has become the defining moment for the environmental movement in a long time, a galvanizing thing that's really gotten people up and ready to act. We're going to need all your help. Go to tarsandsaction.org so you make sure you're up to date with what's going on, and we have your email so we can enlist your help as things develop. I wish to heck that we could stop right now, but in fact, I wish even more that we take this momentum we've got and for once carry it on to victory. Thank you guys so much.
Ready?
So I have a million questions. The first thing I'd like to know is, when you talk about being arrested, what is the reason you were arrested? And at the end you said, we're going to Washington and maybe again where the threat of arrest won't be there. So why were you arrested? Is it not allowable to practice civil disobedience in front of the White House? Is that the reason?
There's an area right in front of the, there's a fence around the White House grounds, and then at this particular area there's a sidewalk where people are allowed to walk past and hold signs, but you're just not allowed to stay there, to sit or to stand there for any length of time. You have to keep moving.
To keep moving.
And so it was very well organized. People went in rows, and as you saw, and sat with banners, And then Park Police came in and gave a series of warnings, and when people didn't move, then they began to arrest them.
Okay, so it's because you weren't moving,
Correct.
basically, why you were arrested.
Correct.
And the next follow-up demonstration, if there is one, that will be different?
Yeah, as I understand it, the idea is to surround the White House, to have people
Okay.
surround the White House in a circle, but no one will be arrested. They're not looking to be arrested.
And why won't they be arrested?
I don't know any other, I guess they'll figure out a way
Okay.
not to be.
Yeah,
I'm not saying you should be arrested, but,
Yeah.
I mean, you should be arrested, I don't think, but
That's not the
it
intention.
doesn't feel like, yeah.
I think the assumption with the November action is that enough people come that the circle would be quite large.
Okay.
So you're not actually in an area.
Trespass.
Great.
Trespassing.
I'd be interested in going.
Walter, would you like to say something about your experience?
Well, it was interesting, and I was delighted to take part in it, and Paul made me an offer of a ride down there and even a place to stay. I couldn't refuse, and I am wholeheartedly against the tar sands. I try to work up a little talk for tonight, and an idea reoccurred to me that I've had several times, and that is that we're really at the end of the automobile. We really have to get out of our cars if we're going to save the atmosphere. Now, we don't have to do it all at once. There are many ways to cut down on our driving. And another thing I've thought of, I personally will never buy another new gasoline-powered car, even a hybrid. I was going to get one of the new plug-in hybrids that are supposed to come out next year, but I'm not going to do it now. I think that when the new cars start to pile up, if everybody would do this, when the new cars start to pile up on the dealers' lots, then Washington is going to have to move. Now, we could talk about this a lot. I don't know what will happen when the cars start to pile up. Will the stock market crash? Will the automobile manufacturers go broke? But I remember in World War II, right after Pearl Harbor, in a period of about 4 months, Detroit stopped making automobiles and turned completely to tanks, military vehicles, and aircraft. And that's what I think it's going to take to get us away from fossil fuel. And we have to, well, a lot of people think we have to start with coal, and I'm in favor of that too. But we must get out of our cars. We can cut our mileage down to the maximum extent. We can never drive alone. We can carpool. We can, I would favor a tax on the fuel, and either make it a revenue neutral tax or use it to pay for a single payer system here in Vermont. Every penny we save from buying fossil fuel stays here in Vermont. When we spend it on fossil fuel, it goes mostly to Texas, 90% of it. And I don't see how we're going to save the planet without some kind of concerted action. We can't make this shift gradually. The administration plans an 80% reduction in fossil fuel use by 2050. I don't think we've got that much time. Lester Brown in his latest book, Plan A or B, he's had a series of plan books. He's a very well-known ecologist from Rutgers, and after he got his PhD from Rutgers, he went to Washington and worked in several Democratic administrations, and he's a prolific writer, and he has some kind of a prestigious award. Maybe he's even got a Nobel Prize, I don't know.
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. But he says this, that we will have to move. We'll have to have a World War II type mobilization to make this change. Our whole system will have to be revamped. We have both the manufacture of automobiles, the repair of them, the roads to operate them on. Those all those come into play. We've got high unemployment already, and but I could see if we mobilized and built millions of wind turbines and installed them on the continental shelf here on the Atlantic coast and up and down Wind Alley, that we could produce all the sustainable energy we need. It would be electric. It's not so hot for personal transportation, but we could electrify the railroads. It'll have to be done sooner or later. The oil is getting more expensive every day. It's in a little slump right now, but it's going to go up. So maybe we can get together and come up with a plan. Maybe Bill McKibben would consider this for an ongoing effort. Thank you.
Is there, are you thinking about trying to organize a bus or something for November 6th?
Well, I just found, it just announced today, and actually I have a sign-up sheet that I'm going to circulate for anyone who's interested to potentially join the LTC. Just put your name there, and in case that we do organize a bus or a van.
The 6th of November is a Sunday.
What time of the day are they calling for? 12 noon or something like that?
I don't think they've set that yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
No.
It's not about encouraging use of Amtrak.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Instead, get people to pool to maybe Springfield and catch a connecting train and use an existing service that's already going there without using us.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that would be a great way to get there.
A train is slow, but it's a train.
It's relaxing.
Yes.
It's a train.
Yes.
Professor, thank you. Is the reason this pipeline is being promoted is because they think it's going to decrease our dependence on foreign oil? What is the reason for the pipeline?
Well, I think there's several reasons. I mean, I was trying to sort of figure it out myself, because State Department is in support. You know, why would they do that? I think one of the reasons, you know, the State Department, what does it do? It tries to have good international relations, so relationships with Canada, something, you know, I'd like to see, you know, that remain strong. You know, there are a lot of forces in Canada that want this built because, you know, it's an economic development thing. They have this resource, and if this pipeline down through the middle of the U.S. doesn't get built, Canada is also proposing, or some people in Canada, a pipeline out to the west coast of Canada, in which case a lot of this would be exported maybe Asia. It's creating jobs up there. When I originally found out about this, it was through a 2009 National Geographic article, and does a good job of just talking to the local people there. People have jobs there. It's a little boom town there and stuff. So, I mean, all these are reasons that none of them, in my mind, are good enough to say, all right, this is worth spewing a lot more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Which is the really overriding issue in my mind. Building this pipeline just encourages that, and we're not in a place where we should be.
I got something in the mail. I'm a member of the National Resources Defense Council, and I got one of these form letters from Robert Kennedy, I think I'm a lawyer for them, about this. Quite detailed about why we should oppose it. But it was the first time I'd ever heard of it. I mean, I don't know how long this has been on the table, but I had only recently really learned about it.
I think Obama's under a lot of pressure from the oil companies to approve it because it would increase their profits. And because some people see it as oil from a friendly source rather than Saudi Arabia.
And their own profits are already huge.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's another aspect, though, having an oil supply from a friendly nation right next door versus a supply from the Middle East or Venezuela or whatever. So, I mean, as the Department of State looks at things, they say, oh, that's a good thing. But again, in my mind, at least, not a reason enough.
If the oil is going to be exported, or at least a good portion, once it theoretically, this is what I understood, then what difference would it make whether it was exported from the west coast of Canada and then imported to the U.S. as opposed to coming down through the U.S. and then exported elsewhere?
Well, if you make that assumption, maybe not. The proposed pipeline out to the west coast of Canada has a lot of opposition as well.
From Canadians?
From Canadians, yeah. So will that get built in? And just delaying this, it may be helpful too, just give us more time to get over to renewables. So, there's benefits just to delaying it as well.
I think that's a really good point. If we get that oil out fast and burn it, the climate is going to heat up so much that there's no way to avoid the worst effects. I mean, we're already seeing a lot more storms, droughts, and so forth. I mean, what we need is time to try to mitigate that or adapt to it. And if this doesn't get built, that buys us some time to do that. Maggie?
I noticed in the 3-minute clip of the demonstrators, there were several Canadians that were also speaking. And I'm wondering if this effort to publicize this XL pipeline, but also to protest against it, is also targeting just the devastation of the tar sands mining itself, rather than exclusively focusing on the pipeline? Or is the pipeline sort of the vehicle to draw attention to the devastation of tar sands mining as well? Because clearly Canadians probably, I would think, aren't as concerned about building the pipeline as they are concerned about ripping up their countryside,
right,
and their cultural heritage.
Well, as I mentioned before, most of the land where the mining is taking place is Native American land that's sacred to them, and of course, their communities are being ripped up and destroyed and devastated. And this has been going on for quite some time and hasn't gotten a lot of public attention. So the pipeline issue is helping to I think, draw attention to that. But that in itself is a worthy issue to publicize and for people to know about just the devastation of the land, which seems irreparable to me, looking at it. Although the companies may claim otherwise. Fred?
I have a related question. I was astounded to see that there's already a pipe, a Keystone pipeline is already goes from there, but it doesn't go away to the Gulf, but it does take oil from the tar sands.
They're already exporting some. I mean, the tar sands have been in operation for a few years,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
some of it's already being exported to the U.S.
Somehow, I guess I just assumed that that was for them, and this was the first, the first time when it would be imported to us. So what, is there more of a difference between the two pipelines, just what the situation is right now?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that either before I got involved in this. I think the difference is this Keystone pipeline would take oil to the Gulf where it can be refined easily and shipped out. So it can be extracted and processed much faster.
And larger capacity.
And in larger capacity.
Well, that first pipeline, was that built for the purpose of going from the tar sands, or was it something that's part of another system? Do we know if that was?
When I started to look at the map, so these other pipelines have little names and stuff, so I started just going to the website. Is there any information about that? And there was some. And I think at least in one case, it used an existing pipeline that was in use for something else. And so they sort of converted that to use for transporting the tar sands oil.
Can somebody speak, and maybe the owner doesn't know, how much dirtier is tar sand processing of oil than conventional oil that you'd be using? I don't have a number in my head. I don't have a way to judge that.
I'm not an expert at all, but what I understand is it's a very heavy, acidic oil, unlike the crude oil that's produced out of Saudi Arabia.
Right.
It's extremely sticky and heavy. They actually heat up the sands. They steam heat it to get the oil out. So it takes a lot of energy to get the oil out. 3 times as much greenhouse gas emissions are produced in extracting the oil from the tar sands than are produced in extracting oil from, say, Saudi Arabia.
So that's a fact that I think is worth getting out. I mean, I should read more about it so I understand that. But I mean, that's a transfer of information I didn't have. I mean, the civil disobedience and everything else is assuming that you already are on the side of saying it's terrible. And here's what we've done. But to get from a point of where we are to there is a process as well.
Right.
And that needs, I think it needs to be backstopped with stuff, which if I've been paying attention, I would have that knowledge. Maybe everybody else does. I don't have that knowledge. But that would be helpful. Maybe it's in your flyers to buttress the actions you're taking because of. So to make that as factual and detailed as it can be done. It's practical.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Paul.
Thank you.
2 questions, or 1 comment, 1 question. My understanding also is that this oil, in addition to what you said about it, Paul, is that it's more granular. In other words, they don't get all the sands or the debris out of it. And one of the things that I've heard is that the increase in leaks through the pipeline, whatever pipeline it's traveling through, is increased because it acts like a sandpaper in traveling through these. So there's a lot of rubbing and wear and tear on the inside of the pipeline just because this oil is not clean, smooth oil until it gets refined. And I guess my second question related to that is, do you know whether this Keystone 1 or whatever they call the original pipeline or the existing one, have there been leaks there, reported or otherwise, and how long, do you know how long that one has been functioning?
I believe there have been many leaks, and I don't have an exact number. Do you?
I
do you
don't
know?
know.
But I have read there have been leaks in that pipeline. That's one of the concerns, is that there would be leaks inevitably in this Keystone, this new Keystone pipeline, which passes over several very sensitive ecological areas.
Another comment. Walter's point about reduced consumption is a great one. And there's, I guess, several ways to convince people to reduce their consumption. One of the ways is to tell them all the terrible things that happen if they don't. And that's not done, it's not worked too well. Well, I shouldn't say that. For some it has. Another way is to tax it as quite heavily. Europe does an awful lot more taxing of its fossil fuels than what we do. Even though we complain about the cost of our fuels and whatnot, we're significantly lower than they are in some other places that have been more serious about trying to reduce consumption. And taxes is a good way of doing that. So whether it's a progressive tax, in that, there's a certain amount of fuel that you could use at a relatively low one, but as you go above that, it goes up quite dramatically. So the person that just chooses to drive the big V8 SUV for 30,000 miles a year is going to pay a huge tax. But the person that just simply goes from home to work and back would not pay the same rate of taxes. I think something like that could really be one of the tools to try to reduce consumption. And so if you take a look at tar sands and say, where does that stand in relationship to other fuels, which is in relationship to natural gas, as an example, which is a lot cleaner? Well, then you've got fracking solutions you've got to worry about, and you've got some other things, but that's domestic, it's much cleaner burning, and it's readily available. If I had to choose which one to use, on the limited information I get now, I would choose natural gas. And so then we get to the conversion of natural gas, to vehicles and whatnot, which is technically not difficult to do, but it goes against the distribution system that's been set up for gasoline. So it's got lots of opposition to migrating it in that way. There may be some things that, some combination of taxes and some combination of selective using of fuels that could help the global warming and all the other environmental issues a lot if you can get enough oomph behind it to make it get some traction. I'm not sure that just the tar sands is maybe a lightning rod, but the problem is much bigger than the tar sands, much bigger than the tar sands. That's an extreme case, and maybe therefore it calls for extreme actions. But there are other things that could be done that could move us in the direction of reduced consumption and using the most efficient and the healthiest fuel sources that we've got. I'm not sure that we're doing enough in those directions here.
I agree with you that a carbon tax would make the most sense in terms of passing on the costs, the environmental costs.
Yeah.
For example, whatever energy source is being used.
And like Walter said, that and the tax could go. The tax shouldn't be used to foster additional consumption. It should be used to, if it ended up being like the smoking tax, I'm not sure it would be wisely used. But,
It doesn't seem to be politically feasible right now, but I think cost is a very powerful motivator. And if gas costs enough, then people start looking for alternatives to driving. And sometimes that's the only thing that motivates people. So I would be very supportive of that. But in today's political environment, it doesn't seem to have any traction. Now that doesn't mean it won't in the future, but right now it doesn't seem to, unfortunately.
Is Al Gore lending his weight to this issue?
Yes, he came out in support of this.
He was there?
He wasn't there
wasn't there.
physically, but he issued a statement of support.
And, where does this vote or this decision that's supposed to be made in November, where does it stand? Do you have a sense of, does it seem like this at this point that this is something that will win approval? Is it sort of in the middle? Is it sort of like on the other side? Where is it politically?
Well, the State Department, Hillary Clinton has said that she's inclined to support approving the pipeline.
Really?
And the State Department has come out with this document that we talked about that is supportive. So it seems to be that they're leaning towards approving
Really?
at this point. And
But, yeah, but the State Department is not the ultimate decision maker.
Right.
It's President Obama. I don't think he's made a statement. He's also getting pressure, a lot of pressure from this action. Some of the people associated with this action is all, word's getting out, so, you know, when he goes and makes an appearance for whatever reason at different places across the U.S. recently, people found out ahead of time and they you know, come out in small protests at particular places. Almost surprises because there's almost not a lot of time to prepare for those protests, but they've been happening.
So that's happening through the website when you know where he's going to be speaking?
Mhm.
That's what's happening.
And also groups of people going to his campaign offices and saying, you know, I worked for Obama during the last campaign. I canvassed for him, and I strongly support him, but I want him to live up to his words and turn this down, or else, you know, I'm not sure that I'll be able to work for him.
I'm ready to say that.
What is always happening on Native American land? Look, Canada's a pretty progressive place. There's a lot of environmentalists up there. So, you know, is the government against it? The natives have sold the permits? What's going on?
That's a great question. I don't know exactly. I mean, I think Canada has a reputation of being progressive environmentally, but I know that the oil minister of Alberta is, from his statement, sounds quite conservative. That he said that he wasn't interested in Kyoto-type agreements, for example. I think they just see it as an economic.
Well, 90% of the Canadians live within 100 miles of the U.S. border, right along the top.
Right.
So the moment you go beyond that, there's almost no one there. So that ends up going to the lands of the natives. And if you take a look at the hydro dams and the flooding that's gone on in eastern Canada, you'll find the very same thing. That it just flooded the land and set up the hydro dams. So we've got all of that land, you know, that's got hydro potential and other raw material potentials, and it's above and beyond just oil, or oil and coal, oil, coal, bauxite, and whatever else. There's a lot of land there with lots of resources, and not too many people up there beyond that narrow zone that have been really opposed to it, and yet it's got financial benefits for all the people. So it's a powerful force.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying it's powerful.
And the natives, people have no power. I mean, they've been oppressed for years, and I think this is a continuation of that.
And I'm not sure, you know, what exactly the ownership structure is of that land, but, yeah. This is from the National Geographic article. The oil sands are gold not only for the oil companies, but also for Alberta's provincial government, which owns the mineral rights to virtually all the land and has encouraged the industry for 3/4 of a century.
Red?
Just another, in response to your point about Canada having a more green reputation, there was a really disturbing article in the last issue of the National Resources Defense Council magazine that talked about exactly that and said that it's really a myth, that we like to think that Canada is our friendly green neighbor to the north, but that actually, I guess in the 70s and 80s, there was a movement in that direction, but especially recently under the conservative government with Harper at the helm, that policy and corporate actions have, that it's really quite destructive environmentally. And I know, just another example, that their policies out in clear cutting forests in their national and provincial forests on the west coast, that they've done some terrible large-scale logging. And so I think it was really eye-opening to me to see that the impression that I had of Canada really doesn't match up to what's happening here today. this seems to be more typical than atypical.
The other proposed pipeline, the one that would go up and head west directly to the west coast of Canada, also passes through native lands as well. They're passing right by, so some of the same issues will arise there.
Yes.
This is my last question. It was, in the letter I received from NRDC, it did say that there would be the destruction of wildlife habitat, I mean, the habitat that birds and animals depend upon. And I wonder if that's being stressed as well, as much as the other things we've talked about. I mean, it's just not one single thing, it's like all this stuff.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, as I said, they're cutting down the forest, so
Yeah.
there's no habitat left. It's just a wasteland. And they talk about, I guess, restoring it, but I just don't see any way it can be restored to anything like what it was, a functioning, healthy ecosystem. I mean, it's being destroyed for the foreseeable future, for animals, for human beings, for anybody.
So that photo that you had of the tar sands, did that used to be trees there?
Yeah.
So what they're doing, it doesn't just exist like that on its own, it's underneath.
Yeah, show them
Yeah, this is actually a good article. I mean, it's balanced. It looks at multiple sides of the issue, but it's 2009, in March of 2009. But so they have a photo of the forest, and then basically, what it looks like once it's done. So,
Wow.
this other National Geographic is about the effects that would happen on the west coast if the pipeline got built to the west coast of Canada.
It seems to me when you drill for oil, you don't have to reconstitute the land, or if so, they're drilling. They're saying that they're going to pay, somebody's going to pay to reconstitute the land. I can't see how, what's it called, energy return and energy investment. I can't see how they can possibly pay off if they really, really do believe that they're going to reconstitute that land.
I think the reason why tar sands have not gone ahead is the fact that oil was so cheap that by the time they got done with the extra extraction costs and the reclamation costs, there was no profit left in it. So they just sat there just with a little sampling things that were done. So there's the price of oil goes up. This is very important. As the price of oil goes up, where the value at that price goes to the refiners and the middlemen and the oil itself. When that goes there, okay, then tar sands can become more profitable when you do it. If the price of oil was made up of a big tax on top of it, say like it is in Europe, okay, and that tax didn't go to those same people. That tax went to alternative energy, R&D, and other activities, then the tar sands would never be profitable enough to go forward. But you'd still have a lot of money with which to reinvest on migrating yourself from an oil economy over to something a lot better. I think the fact that we're not doing that is a real shame. It's almost as bad as the, it's not as bad as the environment that's permanent, but this you could change. And I think it should be changed. And it has to be progressive so that everybody doesn't get hurt. And the small person that just needs this much energy to survive on doesn't have to pay a big tax. But the bigger ones and the companies and the people that choose to be the jet set around all over the place, they pay the big tax. It's being tried elsewhere and with some degree of success. And one of the reasons why I think Europe has advanced further in some of the alternative energies that we have is they've had the money to make the investments to go forward and do some of the research. And the countries that do that, China, by the way, is one of the biggest ones that's doing this, investing in alternative energy, but it's a communist country, so they do what they want to do. But we could be left way behind in that, and we should not be. We should be leading it.
Thank you.
in the State Department statement that you showed, and you noted this, that they had indicated that whoever doesn't think that whether this pipeline is built or not, apparently, it will have any effect at all on the amount of oil coming from the tar sands mine operation. Is that a correct interpretation?
That's what they said.
And I'm wondering if this pipeline, if Obama decides against it and it doesn't get built, Canada will then go to the West Coast. Is that, that's their alternative. I'm wondering what the advantage is to the powers that be that have invested in this somehow, whether it's the government of Canada or Alberta or whoever, why the pipeline that would go all the way down to the refineries in the Gulf would be a more desirable event for them than going to the West Coast. And presumably being able to ship oil from there to wherever they want to send it.
I think it's more desirable because the refineries are already in place in Texas and Houston, and so they can just ship it down there and, you know, go through that whole process and get it into a form that can be burned. Whereas I don't think the West Coast has those refineries in place.
If you look at some of the photos of the West Coast of Canada in the article, you see it's largely undeveloped. It's a pretty nice area. So again, they don't have that infrastructure of oil refineries there. So it has to get refined further somewhere.
So if you're moved to do so, we ask you to call the White House, and you'll get an operator. Just state your opinion about the tar sands. Talk to your friends and neighbors. Ask them to do it. Write a letter to the editor if you feel moved to do so. And consider going down to Washington on November 6th. And I also wanted to mention there's another there's a hearing coming up this coming Wednesday evening from 7 to 9 on the state of Vermont's energy plan at BUHS, the high school. So some of you may be interested in going to that, and that's going to set the blueprint for the state's energy use for the next 20 years, probably. So now's a great opportunity to weigh in on that.
Paul, can you give them there's a website, state website, it's Vermont Energy Plan .vermont.org, I think. It'd be good to get that out because it's the document itself, I didn't get through it all, but it's a pretty meaty document.
It's long.
Yeah. Is it that big? Gee, please, why did I get through it all?
I guess there might be an executive summary.
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
But that's about 50 pages.
Yeah.
Well, rather than just go to it, if they did a little perusing of it and just picked out some items that may be more effective in asking questions and taking input.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you could Google Vermont State Energy.
Yeah, just go to Vermont State Energy and I'm sure that'll lead you to that.
So again, the number is there to call. And I've called, sometimes it can be hard to get through, but you just have to keep trying different days, different times. Eventually you'll get through.
It's easier to get through on their website if you want to.
Or you can email them. Yeah.
This number isn't just for this issue, though, is it?
No. This is the White House switchboard.
That's the White House switchboard.
Is that the same number you can use to tell them to stop being so dysfunctional?
Yeah, you can tell them anything.
And it seems to work.
What's that?
Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.